The tale of the vengeful spirits begins in the quiet shadow of Quach Gia Trang, an ancient villa near the market town of Long An. It was said to have truly happened some 50 years past, in those changing years between 1962 and 1963. In those days, the authorities would come to learn the horrifying truth, led not by mortal clues, but by the embittered whispers of the dead. On a muggy afternoon, Tam Moi was tending his garden, rows of leafy kai bishang glistening in the sun. His land lay close to the estate of Quach Gia Trang, owned by the infamous Qua Bu, a man known for his wealth, second only to Chu Hua in distant Saigon. Tam Moi had just watered 2 troughs, and with buckets hanging from his shoulder pole, made his way toward the canal near the grand villa. As he approached, something caught his eye. A woman, just a few paces ahead, with a childlike bundle in her arms. Even from behind, Tam Moi recognized her, Ba Sao Dio, his sister-in-law by marriage, though not blood, slightly confused. He remembered that her husband, Hai Hu, had told him she'd gone to Saigon, bringing her little one to visit their grandmother. Her father was gravely ill, lying in Cho Quan Hospital. So what was Ba Sao Dio doing here, walking this lonely path? Hesitant. Tam Moi tried to catch up, longing to greet her. He called out, but his voice seemed swallowed by the air. His feet felt anchored, unable to gain ground. The woman and the silent bundle kept moving ahead, always a few paces beyond his reach, as if carried by an unseen current. He hurried, sloshing water from his buckets, heart pounding louder with every step. Still, she never turned, never slowed. The space between them held steady. No matter how fast he walked, she remained just out of reach. Softly, with mounting dread. Then, at the canal's edge, Ba Sao Dio stopped. She released the bundle into the murky water below. In the half-light, Tam Moi could barely discern its shape, but suspicion twisted in his gut. It looked so much like her child. Ba Sao Dio and her husband, Hai Hu, were young still, called Mr. and Mrs. in the old way, though only in their 30s. Tam Moi stared, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, unable to look away from the spectral figure of his sister-in-law at the water's edge. Tam Moi watched, his breath catching, as Ba Sao Dio loosened her grip and let the bundle slip from her arms into the still, murky water. For a single, gut-wrenching instant, he saw its contents. A child, impossibly small. The child was their own, not yet a year old. Choked, a strangled scream tore from Tam Moi's throat, echoing along the canal's deserted banks. Suddenly, Ba Sao Dio straightened, her whole body shuddering with a violent tremor. Then, before his eyes, she vanished. Gone, as if she'd never been there at all. The empty air where she'd stood pressed in upon him with suffocating weight. Reeling, Tam Moi desperately pinched his thigh, seeking the bite of pain, anything to wake him from this nightmare. But agony bloomed under his fingers. He was awake. This terror was painfully, horribly real. The old lies raced through his mind. Hai Hu, her husband, had sworn she was in Saigon, tending to her ailing father. Why had Tam Moi just seen her here, carrying their child to a watery grave? Horror tangled with suspicion. Was some unimaginable tragedy already done? He hurried to Hai Hu's house, heart hammering. Brother, just now, while watering my greens, I saw Sister Ba Sao Dio. She was carrying the child, I think. His voice trembled with dread. You told me she left for Saigon days ago. Is that true? Hai Hu's face drained of color, gray and ghost-like in the dim light. That's impossible. I only just sent a telegram yesterday. She and the child are still in Saigon. Her father is gravely ill at the hospital, so of course she must remain there. Tam Moi watched him, eyes narrowing, every muscle tense with unease. Sensing deception, he took his leave. All day, the vision gnawed at him, refusing to fade. At last, he resolved to act. He went to the local authorities, his story spilling out in low, urgent whispers. The officials listened, exchanging wary glances. If true, this was no ordinary misfortune. Two officers descended on Hai-Hu's home, confronting him with Tam Moi's haunted account. Hai-Hu's answers twisted in his mouth, stumbling, panicked, betraying a terror that ran deeper than fear for his wife. Softly, heavy with dread, suspicion thickened. The officials ordered the canal near Quach Gia Trang to be drained. Neighbors gathered, the stink of dread settling in with the mud. The canal was shallow, water receding with each bucket. Then suddenly, gasps. There they were, the bodies of mother and child tangled in the reeds below, pale and silent beneath the weight of mud and secrets. That night, Hai-Hu was taken away in silent horror. The authorities could not help but shudder. In the end, it was the restless dead who had delivered justice, their silent cries echoing across Quach Gia Trang, remembered for years in hushed, fearful tones. The horror at Quach Gia Trang cast a shadow that would never truly fade. Without the ghostly intervention that led Tam Moi to witness such a harrowing apparition, the true evil may have remained hidden. It was only because the vengeful spirit appeared before him, prompting suspicion and fear, that anyone discovered Hai-Hu's crime. In the stillness of that estate, it was as if sorrow itself had become an eternal resident. Yet evil and unrest found fertile ground elsewhere in Long An. In the early months of 1970, the village of Can Duoc lay quiet under gray skies, its narrow lanes still worn from the footsteps of countless lives. Here lived a young woman, Shu. For years, she was a familiar figure, barely over 20, her slender frame balanced by the heavy carrying pole laden with glutinous rice cakes, meat-filled banh mi, and savory treats. Her call, Ban Tet, Ban U, Bang Mi Thit, was an everyday comfort echoing through the alleys, a lifeline for hungry workers and restless children alike. But one morning, her song vanished. No one heard her cries on the wind. The neighbors first thought Shu had fallen ill, perhaps lying in bed, waiting for fever to break. Yet, as weeks slipped quietly by, her absence grew uncomfortable, then troubling. Was she selling her wares further off? Had she simply moved on, as the markets sometimes claimed their daughters and scattered them to new paths? The mystery thickened, unresolved, until a day of sticky heat and restless schoolchildren. At the village school, Headmistress Oan walked the playground during recess, surveying the laughter and clamor with a practiced, protective gaze. Far from the gates, she paused, catching a sudden, jagged sound, a harsh voice, not of play or innocence. Voice trembling, echoing whispers. "Why did you dare do that to me? You think I won't burn you, just like my father burned that wicked street vendor?" The words burned with anger, spat angrily by a boy named Baby, barely old enough for the 5th grade. His threat, chillingly specific, filled the yard with icy dread. Headmistress Oan, unnerved, summoned Baby to her office. The same office where, many times before, she had bought Shu's cakes and exchanged kind words. Now, as the afternoon shadows stretched long, she struggled to unravel the truth from Baby, meeting only fearful silence and downcast eyes. Softly, "I can't tell you, ma'am. If I talk, my father will beat me to death," Baby whispered, eyes wide with terror. A deeper unease crept into the headmistress's bones. Something dark festered in the village, a secret twisting just beneath the surface. She decided she could not simply turn away. After the headmistress Oan summoned the authorities to the school, it took gentle coaxing and persistent reassurance before Bibi, his small frame shaking, voice trembling, finally began to divulge the horrors he had witnessed. The hush of dusk settling over sprawling fields. That fateful afternoon, Shu ambled through the village, her familiar calls echoing in the air. "Who wants bet? Ban U? Ban Mi Thit?" As she balanced her goods, weaving along her daily route. Her path carried her past Baby's house, a lonely structure swallowed by vast, swaying cane fields. It stood isolated, the shadows deepening beneath a canopy of dense, tangled leaves. Inside, Baby's father, Tu Bin, a drunkard infamous for cruelty, drank heavily with his two companions, both criminal outcasts, feared and despised by the community. The men's laughter was sharp, their eyes rheumy, stained with suspicion and violence. When Shu's sing-song cry drifted to them, the trio called her over with feigned cheer. They bought 2 bon tet and 3 bon mi thit, though none had a single coin between them. Promising to pay when their children returned, they urged Shu to sit, insisting she rest her feet in the waning heat. Shu, ever patient, waited for nearly an hour, enduring their drunken rambling. Finally, her voice broke through their indifference, weary and affronted. Voice wavering but firm. "Really, you three, old enough to be my fathers or uncles, how can you eat without paying? If you didn't have money, you shouldn't have asked for food. Take the food, I'll count it as charity, but don't think I'll come back here to sell again." Anger flared in Tu Bin's jaundiced eyes. Without warning, he snatched a club of rough-hewn wood and brought it down on Shu's neck with brutal force. Then a cold echo. She collapsed, unconscious, limp as a rag doll at their feet. With monstrous intent, the men dragged Shu's unresponsive form behind the house, into the shadow of the cane. There, horror deepened, their repressed impulses erupting with savage cruelty. They stripped her, violating her body in turn beneath the shroud of whispering stalks. But Shu did not wake. When their savage act was complete, and they pressed trembling fingers to her lips, they felt no breath, no warmth, her body already turning cold to the touch, barely above a whisper, breath-catching. Panic clawed at them. As the silence thickened, the men, in a frenzy to cover their crime, heaped dry wood over Shu's corpse and set it ablaze, hoping that the fire would consume her and their terrible guilt alike. In the distance, a faint sob rises, Baby's terror lacing the air. All the while, Baby slept in his small, dim room, mere walls away from the smoldering nightmare blooming outside. Slow, mournful pause, unease wrapping tighter with every word. In that hushed, unsettling night, as slumber pressed over Baby's small, isolated house, something shifted in the darkness. The child lay restless, half lost in uneasy dreams, when strange sounds began to claw their way through the silence, whispers and muffled movements, too many and too odd for the hour. Baby startled awake, eyes wide and heart hammering, and crept cautiously out from his bed. Disoriented and shivering, he wandered through the shadows, drawn by sinister noise filtering in from the rear of the house. From the kitchen's dark threshold, Baby peered through a thin crack. The view out to the garden unleashed a nightmare. His own father, Tu Bin, and the 2 degenerate companions were looming over Shu, the vendor woman, her body limp and broken, enacting horrors Baby had only ever heard about in cruel stories. He witnessed, in chilling detail, their brutality, their monstrous crime, and then the hasty stacking of firewood, the ghastly act of burning her body to ash in hopes of erasing their guilt. Paralyzed by terror, Baby retreated, mind screaming but limbs obediently feigning ignorance. He crawled beneath his thin blanket and squeezed his eyes shut, determined to bury the memory so deep it could never claw its way out. Days later, his secret suffocated him. Word spread of a missing woman. The headmistress, Oan, along with watchful neighbors and the authorities, pressed gently but relentlessly until his defenses broke. Sobbing, voice cracking, Baby retold the nightmare, each detail tumbling out, heavy with dread and shame. The officials descended on Tu Bin's home, mapping Baby's words onto charred earth and ash. Under the weight of evidence and his son's haunted testimony, Tu Bin confessed, as did his cowardly companions. Justice came, slow but sure, dragging their sins into daylight. but fate refused to close its ledger. Not long after the confessions, one night as Bai labored over his schoolwork by the flickering lamplight, Tu Bin slumped in a drunken stupor. Another presence pressed against the fragile boundary between worlds. He saw, at the threshold, a woman entering from the garden. Her silhouette was unmistakable, the rounded, familiar form of Shu, whole yet impossibly pale beneath the wan glow. She drifted closer, her voice a chill on his skin. Your father and his friends murdered me, took everything from me. Only you saw it all. You have to help me, avenge what they did. Bibi's voice trembling, pleading. No, please, I can't. I'm afraid of my father. If he finds out, he'll kill me, just like he beat my mother. I can't help you. I'm sorry. You've seen what he is. Your mother suffered too, beaten and cast out. Don't you wish you could protect her? Don't you wish she could be safe? Bibai's defenses crumble. Tears burn down his cheeks. He remembers every bruise, every sob. Guilt and longing dissolve into silent crying until a sudden jolt shakes him awake. The ghost is gone. Only the echo of her sorrow lingers in the still, haunted air. Bibai understood then that some nightmares never end. Shu's story faded with her ashes, but its weight pressed down on him, on that cursed home, forever. Justice had come, but peace never returned. The shadows of Quach Gia Trang and the tragedy at Can Duoc were whispered to be true, stories that the elders in Long An knew well. If anyone still remembered, it would be the oldest among the families living near Quach Gia Trang, or by the lonely roads winding through Can Duoc. The past lingered there like an unshaken mist, clinging to memories of the vanished and the lost. So many years had drifted by. The first story, they said, happened in 1962. The second in 1970, secrets buried beneath decades, pain pressed deep into the roots of the land. Only in hushed conversations beneath flickering house lights would the elders sometimes recount what was seen, what was felt, and what still lurked just out of sight. The stories may have ended for now, but the wind carried rumors, and the spirits of the restless were said to keep watch. The truth, heavy and haunted, waited for anyone brave enough to remember or to ask those who came before.